In this video, I'm going to show you 3 brawlers to pick in order to counter every brawler in the game. I'm going to be listing natural counters, so this guide should even be useful even after balance changes. And it's particularly helpful in Power League. Just keep in mind that some brawlers have tons of counters and others hardly have any, and it just kind of depends on how strong they are. First up are the Trophy Road Brawlers. Shelly is very low in the meta right now. She has historically always been very low, and there are a lot of brawlers to counter. However, in particular, Stu, Crow, and Ems do a very good job at keeping just far enough away from Shelly and falling back if she happens to get close enough, so they do really well. Next are Nita's counters, which are Carl, Griff, and Amber. Nita tends to struggle with most brawlers that have just more range than her. While Carl and Amber can shoot their attacks right through Nita's bear, Griff can destroy the bear very quickly from a safe distance. Colt's natural counters are Daryl, Mortis, and Spike. Since Colt's attacks travel in a straight line and have a slow unload speed, brawlers like Daryl and Mortis can maneuver very easily around the attacks, and while Colt is often used to break lots of walls on the map, Spike is really good at taking Colt out on an open map because of the range. Next is Bull, who's countered by Shelly, Ems, and Gale. Bull pretty much has to be point blank or he deals just like no damage at all. And it's pretty much impossible for him to get that close to these 3 brawlers, with the exception of Shelly, but she can actually out super him, so she's really good. Now, Jessie's counters are Piper, Grom, and Leon. She's not very bad against brawlers that can outrange her, but she really needs her turret in order to make a difference in a match. These 3 brawlers not only 1v1 Jessie very well, but they can also destroy her turret almost instantly from a distance, which renders Jessie pretty much useless. We've got more counters to cover, but first, I'm so excited to announce a brand new partnership with Samsung. And this video is sponsored by my newest mobile obsession, the Galaxy Z Fold 4. I have been using this phone for the past couple of weeks, and I cannot tell you guys how cool this is. I mean, it's so awesome. I mean, not just because it's a folding phone, right? Boom! But because the Z Fold 4, I think it's fair to say it could be the king of gaming. So click on that link below to check it out. It has a 120 hertz refresh rate and a 300 hertz touch sampling rate, which makes this phone one of the most responsive mobile devices you can get. With a 3.2 gigahertz processor clock speed, 12 gigs of RAM, a 4400 milliamp hour battery, this phone is going to handle pretty much anything you can throw at it, and it's going to last a long time as well. You can even play 2 games at once if you're really hardcore, but the unfolded screen makes a huge difference for Brawl Stars as well. I actually use the Samsung Slim standing case to prop it up just like a tablet, and then I pull out my most current tier list on screen while I'm drafting in Power League. Honestly, I could make a whole video just talking about all the features that this phone has. Whether you want the ultimate gaming console right in your pocket, or the ultimate multitasking device, or just a reliable phone, now you can have all 3 in one device. So click that link below to learn more about the Galaxy Z Fold 4, and once again, a huge thank you to Samsung for not only sponsoring this video, but also for being an awesome new partner. Now, Brock is countered by Max, Daryl, and Mortis. He's very similar to Colt, except instead of having a slow unload speed, it's his projectile speed that really lacks. Daryl and Mortis are really good at dodging his attacks, and Max can make her whole team fast enough to dodge them so easily. Dynamite is countered by Mortis, Stu, and BB. Now, Mortis and Stu are basically impossible for Mortis to hit unless Dynamite just like has help from his teammates or can just get a really lucky stun. Then there's BB, who can't dash, but she has some of the fastest movement speed in the game with her home run star power. Bo's counters are Max, Carl, and Colette. Now, his main attack is very solid, and there isn't really a major counter to it, so to counter Bo, you want to go with brawlers that can safely get rid of his mines. Max is fast enough to easily move in and out of it on foot, and then we have Carl and Colette, who both have abilities that allow him to safely dash through multiple mines at a time. There are other brawlers that can do this as well, like Mortis. Just keep in mind, I'm trying to just limit it to only 3. Tick's counters are Jean, Fang, and Sam. Jean's healing puff star power is a huge counter to Tick because although Tick can consistently deal damage, the amount of damage he deals is so small, it's really hard for him to defeat enemies when there's a Jean around. Fang and Sam have enough health to simply run through a mine or 2 and still have plenty of time to catch up to Tick and defeat him with a couple of hits. 8-Bit's counters are Bell, Dynamite, and Squeak. Bell makes it very difficult for 8-Bit to stay near his super, and if he isn't near it, then he really doesn't do very much. Then we have Dynamite and Squeak, who can easily hit their shots because of how slow 8-Bit is, and who can also easily destroy his super even when it is behind a wall. Ems' counters are Mortis, Stu, and Crow. Once Ems runs out of her friend zoner gadget, Mortis and Stu can easily move right next to Ems where she does almost no damage. Crow, on the other hand, has a little bit more range than Ems does and can use his super to get very close to her or even escape her super if he needs to. Stu's counters are Crow, Lola, and Poco. Stu can use his super to stay away from close range brawlers and dodge attacks that travel in a narrow, straight line. All 3 of these brawlers can at least match his range with their attacks, plus they're wide enough where it's difficult for Stu to avoid them even with his super. Up next, we have the rare brawlers. El Primo's counters are Surge, Colette, and Gale. These brawlers have everything they need to keep El Primo from catching them inside of his attack range. Not only that, but they all have abilities that can bump him back, even if he does happen to land a super close to them. Barley is countered by Mortis, Brock, and Edgar. Brock has a little bit more range than Barley does, and he has a couple of abilities that break walls, which makes it really difficult for Barley to continue to deal damage. Even if he can keep his walls up, he's no match for Mortis or Edgar, who can easily approach him and assassinate him. Poco gets countered by Griff, Crow, and Mortis. Crow obviously cuts all of Poco's healing in half as long as the target is poisoned. Then we have Griff, whose super is just really good at countering Poco double tank comp that is very strong popularly whenever Poco is strong, and Poco can't really do much against Mortis once he's right next to him. Rosa gets countered by Gale, Shelly, and Frank. As I've mentioned, Rosa just can't get close enough to Gale or Shelly to deal any significant damage to them. Frank has a little bit more range than Rosa, and his super is good at keeping her stunned while her shield is activated. Up next are the super rare brawlers. Rico is countered by Sprout, Grom, and Buzz. Now Rico may be one of the best brawlers for shooting around walls, but Sprout and Grom can shoot over walls, so Rico has a pretty hard time dealing with them. Buzz is a great assassin against Rico, since Rico can't do much to Buzz if he actually gets launched onto him. Daryl gets countered by Surge, B, and Colonel Ruffs. Now Daryl can't do a lot to Colonel Ruffs without feeding him his super, and Colonel Ruffs can use his super to knock Daryl back away if he actually does roll up onto him. Surge and B can obviously keep far away from Daryl, and they have really good DPS for damaging tanky brawlers. Penny gets countered by Grom, Amber, and Squeak. Now all three of these brawlers have more range than Penny, plus they can all deal damage whether she puts down her salt barrel or not, and they can even destroy her cannon on the other side of a wall if that's what happens, which makes it really difficult for Penny to in the first place. Carl gets countered by Surge, Colette, and Stu. Now Surge and Colette can use their supers to interrupt Carl's super. Stu can't interrupt his super, but his zero drag star power does a pretty good job at making sure Carl can't catch Stu with it. Next is Jackie, who is countered by Shelly, Surge, and Gale. She literally can't do anything unless her opponent is right next to her, so obviously these three brawlers are really good at countering her. Gale can blow her away, Surge can jump on her, then you have Shelly, who's just such a great counter against all tanks. Up next are the epic brawlers. Piper gets countered by Max, Leon, and Tick. Max and Leon have fast movement speeds, which makes it really hard for Piper to actually hit her shots. Then we have Tick, who has a similar range to Piper, but Tick's super can waste 2 or 3 shots on Piper depending on how close it is to her, and oftentimes she really struggles to take it out. Next is Pam, who gets countered by Crow, Squeak, and Spike. Crow has more range than Pam and also slows down her healing that she provides for her team. Squeak and Spike both outrange her, and they have abilities that keep enemies outside of her super while destroying it also at the same time. Next is Frank, who is countered by Colette, Surge, and El Primo. No brawler takes Frank's health down to 0 faster than Colette. Then you have Surge and El Primo, who can continuously use their supers to interrupt Frank's super or even just his main attack. Like, there's very little Frank can do against them. Next is BB, who is countered by Stu, Surge, and Griff. Stu can pretty much stay outside of BB's range during the entire match by using his super. By now, it should be obvious that Surge is a go-to counter pick for tanks, and Griff can destroy walls that BB would typically use for cover. Next is B, who is countered by Tick, Sprout, and Grom. B is a great counter against tanks and still has the range to hold her own against very long-range brawlers, but she can't break walls and she has low health, so these three throwers are big problems for her. Next is Nani, who gets countered by Jean, Leon, and Tick. Now, Jean and Tick all have as much range as Nani, and she can't one-shot them with her super as long as Tick is able to use his gadget. They also deal their damage with several projectiles, which makes it so that Nani's return to sender gadget is pretty much useless against them. Next is Edgar, who is countered by Otis, Stu, and Shelly. Stu can instantly dash away from Edgar anytime Edgar uses his super jump on him. Shelly is a... Edgar better not jump on Shelly or she's gonna blast him away. Then we have Otis, who can disable Edgar after using his super, and that makes him very easy to defeat even if he's soloing against him. Next is Griff, who's countered by Crow, Spike, and B. Now Spike outranges Griff by quite a bit, and the more walls that Griff breaks, the better off Spike is going to be throughout the match. Then we have Crow and B, who also outrange him, and they counter his business resilience star power as well. Now Grom is countered by Mortis, Fang, and Daryl. Like most throwers, Grom just doesn't do well against close range assassins, and these three are his worst enemies. They'll have lots of health and dashing attacks that makes it very easy to get close to Grom. Bonnie is countered by Colette, B, and Pam. Pam's super is really great against Bonnie's slower rate of fire while in her cannon form, and then her Scrap Sucker gadget counters her melee form. Colette and Bee are also really good against her cannon form, and Colette can even push her away with her super if Bonnie does jump on her. Up next, we have the Mythic Brawlers. Mortis gets countered by Stu, Shelly, and Otis. Mortis is the only brawler that literally has to go through a brawler in order to deal damage to them. As I've mentioned before, these three brawlers are the best in the game at preventing exactly that. Shelly just blasts him away, Stu can use his super to escape from him, and then you have Otis who can just disable all of his abilities and then take him out from there. Terra gets countered by Ems, Janet, and Poco. Now the clones from Terra's gadget can provide her some decent cover, but all three of these brawlers can take them out with just one ammo. Janet's especially good against Terra since she has more than one ability that can escape from Terra's super, plus she can easily outrange her as well. Next is Jean, who gets countered by Mr. P, Eve, and Penny. Jean's attacks has a very hard time getting past the pets, so like Mr. P and Eve are really good counters against him since they constantly are spawning stuff. Penny doesn't really have a pet that can go after an enemy, but she does have a couple of things that she can throw down to prevent her from being pulled in. Obviously her salt barrel, and then if she really needs to, she can throw down her turret. Now Max gets countered by Crow, Lola, and Poco. Crow's gadget does a very decent job at canceling out Max's super, whether it's Max that's supering or she's actually sped up her teammates and you want to slow them down. All three of these brawlers also have wide ranged attacks, so it's tough for Max to avoid them even if she does activate her super. Next is Mr. P, who gets countered by Janet, Amber, and Carl. Mr. P is very weak without the support from his porters, especially from close range. These three brawlers all have attacks that can shoot right through his porters, and then Carl and Janet have abilities that can easily get themselves right next to Mr. P, which makes him really struggle. Next is Sprout, who's countered by Mortis, Daryl, and Buzz. Sprout is obviously really bad at point blank range, and so assassins are really great at countering it. These assassins in particular have good abilities for quickly approaching Sprout without even needing to deal damage to it first. Now Byron gets countered by Crow, Bee, and Ash. Crow slows Byron's healing, and Bee's attacks are so strong that they don't even give any enemies an opportunity to heal over time, and then Ash maintains his rage a lot easier against Byron since Byron's attacks deal damage over time, and Byron can't really do anything against a fully raged Ash. Next is Squeak, who's countered by Mortis, Max, and Leon. Squeak's attacks don't really deal very much damage right away, which gives Mortis and Leon time to use their supers to heal before the damage is dealt. Then there's Max, who doesn't really have a good healing ability, but her phase shifter gadget can easily prevent all of the damage from his attacks. Up next, we have the legendary brawlers. Spike gets countered by Sprout, Tick, and Grom. Spike is kind of like Bee in the sense that he's good in both close range and long range, but also like Bee, Spike has no way of breaking walls and he has very little health, so throwers are his weakness. Next is Crow, who's countered by Janet, Spike, and Lola. Crow pretty much can't use his super offensively as long as Janet has her super charge, and then you have his gadget, which doesn't affect her super at all. Spike and Lola each have abilities that can block a lot of Crow's damage at a distance, and they deal more damage than Crow at about the same range. Now Leon gets countered by Jean, Crow, and Pam. The vision gear has really hurt Leon since it's harder for him to stay hidden while using his super if an enemy has it equipped. And these three brawlers not only make the vision gear way more effective, but they almost don't even need it because they can still keep Leon exposed. Now Sandy gets countered by Jean, Crow, and Poco. These three brawlers also make it hard for Sandy or his teammates to stay hidden in his super. Not only that, but they also outrange him by quite a bit, and once you're far away from Sandy, like there's not very much Sandy can actually do. It's not like he has a way to jump onto them or anything like that. Now Amber gets countered by Mortis, Leon, and Poco. Amber can't deal enough burst damage to keep Mortis away from her, and all three of these brawlers are also able to heal themselves so that they can easily survive her super if they do get caught up in it. Meg gets countered by Spike, Bee, and Lola. Like I said before, Spike and Bee don't really care how tanky a brawler is, and so they handle Meg very well whether she's in her mecha or not. Then you have Lola, who pretty much just prevents Meg from charging her super in the first place. If Lola can get her super in front of her, Meg just does no damage, and that's going to make it very difficult for her to get through that shadow. And finally, we have the Chromatic Brawlers. Gale gets kind of countered by Spike, Piper, and Belle. Gale is like this brawler that doesn't really have any hard counters, but sometimes it can be really tough for him to charge his super on brawlers that all outrange him. And all three of these brawlers have more range, and Piper can even blow up walls, which Gale usually uses to his advantage. Surge gets countered by Colonel Ruffs, Spike, and Eve. All three of these brawlers have more range than Surge, which makes a huge difference when Surge is trying to pass that first upgrade. They also have spawns that they can use to block Surge's projectiles, which makes him very difficult to charge his super up again. Colette gets countered by Griff, Bee, and Poco. Bee has very little health, so Colette can't really do very much damage to her, but Bee can still dish out a lot of damage against Colette. Griff and Poco both have abilities that offer some consistent healing, which can make it very difficult for Colette to defeat them. Next is Lou, who gets countered by Janet, Carl, and Max. Now Lou's counters are brawlers that can easily get outside of his super, because that's pretty much what makes Lou good in the first place. These three brawlers all have super supers and gadgets that can help them get out of his super, which just makes Lou pretty much pointless in a match against them. Now, Chrono Ruffs gets countered by Sprout, Carl, and Bell. Chrono Ruffs usually uses his sandbags to help him win 1v1s, and we have Sprout and Carl that can shoot right through them, and we have Bell's attack, which can actually bounce off of them to actually deal damage to Chrono Ruffs in the first place. Now, Bell gets countered by Piper, Meg, and Leon. Leon is the best assassin against Bell because of his invisibility, and Piper can two-shot Bell in long-range 1v1s. Then we have Meg, who has a fast movement speed, which makes it easier to dodge her shots, but if she gets hit by Bell's super, it actually goes away if she gets in or out of her mecha. Next, we have Buzz, who's countered by Stu, Max, and Sandy. A lot of brawlers have abilities that can push Buzz away after they've been stunned by a super, but these are the best brawlers that can actually avoid being stunned in the first place, even if Buzz does latch onto them. Now, Ash gets countered by Ems, Gale, and Janet. Gale is probably our best brawler for keeping close range brawlers away from him. Then we have Ems and Janet that not only have abilities that can help them keep their distance, but they can also totally wipe Ash's super out with just one attack. Next is Lola, who gets countered by Belle, Bo, and Penny. Bo's main attack actually works surprisingly well against Lola, since his arrows explode and her super doesn't do a great job of protecting her from them. Then we have Belle and Penny, who actually use Lola's super to their advantage, which can result in some extra damage against her. Now, Fang gets countered by Gale, Jean, and Eve. Gale and Jean both have abilities for pushing Fang away after he uses his super to get close to them, but Eve's gadget is really good for avoiding his super, and her hatchlings can actually cause problems for Fang since he can only hit one target at a time with his attack. Speaking of Eve, she gets countered by Carl, Janet, and Poco. Just like Mr. P, Eve is much stronger with the support from her hatchlings. Each of these brawlers have attacks that can go right through her little babies, and Poco can even counter the damage they deal over time with his heals. Now, Janet gets soft countered by Griff, Bonnie, and Amber. She doesn't really have any great counters because she just has good range. She has abilities to get herself out of like any situation with her super and her gadget, but Amber's super can deal damage to Janet even if she uses her super, and then Griff and Bonnie are just really tough for Janet to kill. Next is Otis. He gets countered by Piper, Byron, and Tick. Otis's super is really great against assassins because of how well it prevents burst damage, but long-range brawlers can easily drop back for a few seconds, and these brawlers in particular usually use that kind of time to reload anyway. And then of course we have Sam, who's countered by Gale, Griff, and Surge. By now, you know that Gale and Surge are the go-to counters against close-range brawlers, and Griff is a great one too because he just deals so much damage with his main attack and his super at close range. And those are my 3 best counters for every single brawler, but let me know in the comment section below if there are any brawlers that you think are better counters. Make sure you guys subscribe for some more awesome Brawl Stars content, or check out my other channels for some other content as well. We also have some a Brawl Stars video right here. Sometimes I just mess up the end of these videos so bad. You should check it out. It's a really good one. For now, this is KairosTime ticking by. We will see you in Brawl Stars.